Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to a new episode of Open Source. We're at episode number 8, and I'm very happy to welcome Tony Buckle to our show. Tony, say hi.
Hi. How are you?
Rory, say hi. Mark, come on. You guys
Hey, everybody.
now, no? Okay. Tony, welcome so much to our show. Could you give us a brief introduction on yourself, and also why have you decided to join our community?
So a brief introduction of myself. I am, I suppose, a relatively veteran now member of the insurance underwriting community. I've worked pretty much globally in that role, both in technical underwriting roles and portfolio management roles. I currently work for AXA XL, but will be joining Allianz Global Corporate and Specialty next week, which I'm
Brilliant. And why have you decided to join this community?
Well, look, at the end of the day, digital is the way that the world is going. Some, I think, in the insurance community want to deny that, but I think that is the reality of our world. And I think we need to not only embrace it, I think we need to get very excited about this. I think too many people are casting this as a cost reduction scheme. The only reason we're doing digitization is to get rid of cost. Actually, I want to make a point about a couple of other things today, which I think is very, very, very exciting about what digital enables. Firstly, it enables us to focus our human element on much more exciting and actually, essentially what they're brought into work to do task. So underwriters, I'm an underwriter, the teams I manage are underwriters, they want to underwrite. They don't want to be sitting there trying to work out what is the next process step they need to go through. So in very simple terms, a workflow tool based on digital that actually enables them to go seamlessly from one stage in their process to another is incredibly value adding, because it just takes a whole load of bureaucracy off their plates and out of their minds, right? And that should reduce all that sort of incidents, risk incidents that happen, but also improve governance as a whole. But secondly, I think it does more than that. It actually brings into play other important sources of information, right? So that historically we were rather constrained by looking at the past and our own past as to how risks had performed. Nowadays we can take a much more contemporary view of risk. And potentially the whole idea that we actually look at risks once a year goes out the window. We start looking at risks in current and actually underwriting them based upon their current profile rather than what happened 5 years ago. That's incredibly exciting, because that, we talk about the blockchain sort of connecting things. Actually, this breaks a chain. This breaks a chain, which I would, is rather akin to the ball and chain that we have in the past of people having to look at their historic data all the time to understand their current the risks currently on the table in front of them. So I'm really excited about the potential of this stuff for what it can do positively. Now, I'm not going to walk past the cost saving, but let's be honest, the cost saving comes from tasks which were essentially drudgery, and anything that gets us away from that has to be a good.
Perfect. I think this is totally music to our ears. So thank you so much for that. Now, Mark, as usual, can you explain to us a little bit about what is your wallpaper behind you? But first, can you do this for me? Okay. It's like you're shrinking and you can come back on all full speed.
Take it off the wall. So yeah, it's an art gallery. So art and provenance is a kind of a link to a couple of my my stories of this week, things I like, things that I find interesting. So that's where we are.
Okay, great. Actually, so Rory, if you could kick it off and tell us, what is it in the news that you found interesting?
Great, thanks, Walid. So last week, my like was around this thing called the virtual room, which Elliot Arazi introduced us to. It's a virtual space where brokers can be matched to underwriters and then either meet face-to-face or agree to meet in that virtual room to recreate the live experience of being in Lloyd's when parts of you, or for parts of the process you can't be. And this week I discovered something a bit like that, but with a focus on the placement process for subscription markets. It's called Risk Book, one word, obviously. That's the new norm, isn't it? It allows brokers to place a risk and submit to various underwriters at the same time, and then to follow the submission and track any line conditions and so forth. The Lloyd's placement system has always been, for those of a legal mindset like me, a legal anomaly, but Risk Book puts a frame around it and guides it to make sure there's no slippage. But rather like Tony mentioned, guiding the process so the humans can do what they do best and not have to think of what is my next process step. So Risk Book are approved by Lloyd's as an e-placement platform, and I really think they're going somewhere. There's a good, simple UX. They walked me through it the other day, and the team are that rare combination of people who are from insurance but are also from innovation, a bit like us. So the business model is a micro commission of the premium, and that's folded into the broker's fee and then recovered by the platform, which sounds kind of honest to me, because it brings efficiency. Risk Book brings efficiency to the brokers, which hopefully then the brokers can pass on to their customers in the form of a reduced commission, given that they provide less services. So I'll put a link in the thread, and people out there who are brokers can check it out, but also people like Tony who need to agree that their brokers should use that platform, should go on it and involve them too.
Great. I know I participated with Ben Rose, the CEO of Risk Book, at a TinTech conference a couple of weeks ago regarding innovation. He's a very clever guy, and from what I remember, he's an ex-Munich Re, I think. But yeah, totally the right approach regarding innovation. Tony, what is it that you found in the news that was interesting this week?
Well, I think building on another theme, you had a sort of diversity theme last week, particularly with a gender flavor to it. And I think we can't walk past the Black Lives Matter movement, but it's more than the movement. It is the reaction to that movement. I think we're getting away from superficial conversations about gestures, which is where we were maybe 2 years ago, and getting into a deeper conversation about our past. And I'm really impressed with the evolution we're seeing on both sides. So obviously what's happened with the NFL is fantastic, but let's just take a moment just to pause on that. They have fundamentally changed their position, probably at some level of political cost, right? That is a fundamental change. We were wrong, and I love also the reaction we've seen from, I think it was one of the tight ends from the Houston Texans who was quoted, where he turned around and said, I'm not looking for revenge. What I'm looking for is learning. People must look into their past. They must engage with their past. They must recognize what happened in the past and why we are feeling like we are feeling. Because only then can we have a really honest conversation. Only then can we actually talk about forgiveness, because you're actually seeking forgiveness and we're willing to give it to you. But unless you're willing to have that conversation, unless you're willing to engage, how can we forgive you? And I think that is a wonderful, shall we say, evolution in the depth of this whole, I suppose, cultural current, right? And it's great to see that it hasn't just limited itself to the US and to sports in the US. It's actually become a global movement. I think what's going on in Europe, where people are starting to engage with their past more. Let's again get beyond the symbols. It's not about toppling statues. It's about engaging with our past and actually thinking through what happened and why communities are feeling as they do.
Brilliant. No, that's great to keep highlighting that point. It keeps coming back throughout our open source episodes. So thank you for that. Mark, could you tell us what you found interesting in the news this week?
Sure. Yeah, and in some ways, kind of links to it. I love that, Tony. The quote that caught me a couple of weeks ago is, "Never have people needed a damn good listening to like they do now." And it's almost, if you listen with the same passion as you argue, your most strongly felt point, and then people can come together. So it's, really interesting. So the thing that I really liked in the last week, Art & Co. So Art & Co. is a project by InsureAid. So that's the insurance industry initiative to support the uninsurable. But what Art & Co. have done, and they're one of the largest online auctions, they've been supporting charities around what they call the 5 Ds of the COVID virus. So it's about disease, death, depression, domestic violence, and disproportionality for ethnic minorities. So they've had an auction event from the 25th to the 27th it was topped out by the Silicon Valley investor Tim Draper, and he was talking about the application of blockchain in the art world. So again, that really interesting, and he's really high profile in terms of, you know, he's the guy that early stage investor in people like Twitter, Tesla, Coinbase, DocuSign, etc. But they use LuxTag for provenance tracking. They've got something called Papyrus, and it's the thing about the authenticity and the ownership of the art. So every item's tagged. Then you've got the full data around it in terms of how it's been traded, so to prevent forgery. So you've got a real piece about ownership. So it's great to see technology come in, but for a great cause as well with those 5Ds. So I love that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you for sharing that. Back to you, Tony. What is it in the news that made you wonder?
Well, I think there's a number of things that have made me wonder, to be honest, in the news at the moment. Clearly, the results are starting to become very well known, I think, from first quarter in the insurance industry. So, and I think the reaction of the market to some of that has been interesting, right? So I think we're in a situation where some people are looking to capital funding. Obviously, other people are looking for strategic optionality. We know what that means. So I think it's very, very confirming in a sense that, you know, the corporate insurance market has got itself into a tough space, right? And how we come out of this tough space will be very, very important for our future. Something that's come through from AIRMIC in the UK has been that, you know, this is a moment where potentially insurers just lose the plot and just stop being relevant to industry. You know, if we start denying coverage everywhere, then we're just not relevant to industry. You know, excluding everything doesn't really help. You know, and Elon Musk has already said on something as critical as his directors and officers insurance, we're not buying that from insurance companies. We're going to buy that. Sorry, we're not going to buy that at all. I'm going to fund that for you. You know, I'm going to be basically your personal insurer. So trust me, I'll use my personal wealth to fund your exposures. So I think this is really throwing down a gauntlet to the insurance industry around relevance. And I think that, you know, as I take on my new challenge, you know, trying to get that right balance between being obviously economically viable. No one wants the insurance industry to be sort of economically unsustainable. That's not going to be good for anyone. But at the same time, being relevant to our customers, we've got to make sure that relevance piece is still being left, right, and center in our thinking.
So just want to comment a little bit about that, because, you know, that question about relevance, it's something that has come upon our podcast a few times since 2018, when we had Lars Henneberg, who is a global head of risk at Maersk. And he, you know, in very typical Viking style, you know, he comes with the hammer of Thor to the insurance industry and says, you know, you got to work differently because I'm leaving. And he has a reputation of creating captives, you know, to you know, internally to self-insure his company. Is that question of relevance? Is it because, you know, as you say, you know, we're not covering individuals correctly, or sometimes we're not even bothering to do it? Is it because our expenses are so high? Also, you know, is it because, you know, we have such antiquated processes and ways of working that makes our expenses are extremely high, and we're not very customer centric? We don't fully appreciate our customers' requirements, and there's this total mismatch. How can we ensure that insurance remains relevant?
Well, I think, you know, the last thing I think we want to do is turn that into a process conversation. You know, we are relevant because our processes are bang up to date. It's not a compelling reason to go and buy an insurance product, right? So I think let's be a little bit humble about what we can do there in terms of maybe the technology. Frictional costs, yes, they are high in our industry. You know, that can be a bit of a rabbit hole as well, right? There are reasons why the costs are so high. We have, you know, regulatory capital and all those other requirements and that sort of stuff, which is right and proper. That just means that we are in a highly regulated space, and that brings its own level of frictional cost. Okay, so we need to be careful about tarring the industry with something which in a sense is just a feature of the industry. But the key thing is that we talk about innovative products. We talk about innovative coverages. Then we talk about things that are really relevant to our client. And the key thing there at the end of the day, and Mark talked about it earlier, is listening. We've just got to get on the front foot with our listening rather than on the back foot with our listening. So aggressive listening is what I want to be doing. I want to go out there, and I think brokers are much more willing now to entertain some tripartite conversations. Get people in front of each other, really talking. I know that's tough with COVID, but the dialogue we can have is going to lead to better solutions. And I think it's been the willingness of the industry to try and automate, frankly, antiquated process, or to try and make digital, products that are no longer pertinent. That is not the way forward, right?
Yeah.
Don't automate, obliterate, I seem to remember being a tagline a few years ago, right? And I think that if it's not relevant to our customers, just get rid of it. Don't automate.
Yeah. Agreed.
So I think that aggressive listening point is so important. And I really want to be on the front foot, listening to clients, understanding their needs, and then molding covers that are appropriate, but obviously are economically sustainable for parties.
Yeah.
I think as well, building on Tony's point, what we're seeing is some stressing of the system, and what we're also seeing is far more than just product relevance, is behavioural stuff. So what we're talking about is when, and we've known it's always ambiguous in terms of the questions of coverage and quantum, and Rory's doing some fantastic work to try and remove degrees of that ambiguity with the legal engineering. But you also get to this fundamental piece of, if you erode trust, so insurance is about, I buy a future promise. And when you start to see denials of coverage for what might be tenuous reasons, that's when you really start to unravel what the customer thinks they're doing. And at that point, that you might have a product that looks great, but if underneath it all you don't believe that it's going to be delivered, then you're going to seek other solutions. So that's, and back to Tony's point, unless you understand that strength of feeling and have that empathy with your customers, then you're not going to build or behave in a way that is valued, and that will unpick it as well. Yes, you've got to be viable, but if you erode trust, you're sunk.
Agreed. Whilst you're on the mic, Mark, could you tell us what is it in the news that made you wonder?
So one of the pieces around this is decentralized fact checking.
Okay.
So Jack Dorsey at Twitter has been kind of floating this for a couple of months, and there have been other people working on it before then. Why through Twitter? Well, a certain high-profile individual has been posting things that have been fact-checked quite a lot. But what's interesting about it is Jack's been saying, look, there's a need for fact-checking, but it should be open source, and it shouldn't be through new intermediaries like Twitter as a platform itself. And the things that made me wonder about it are, first of all, fact-checking, you almost think it binary. So is it true, is it false? But there's a lot about how we perceive that. So there are different groups of people working on this. A couple of examples, there's Newsblocks, which is based in Glasgow in the UK. And effectively they create interactive news and timelines, and they think about it as a kind of a Wikipedia for news. So there's a crowdsourcing of, do we agree this is right or not, and it uprates it or downrates it. And again, what they realised is they're collecting data. So they give an example of Yoko Ono holds an art exhibition, and it might mention that she was married to John Lennon, who was murdered in 1980. So you've got 3 pieces of data that you can extract and then use them in different ways. And then when data's being used in different ways like that, and you can trust it, you can start to create new products. So there's an element of how can you use it and monetize it. And then when you've got an open platform, everybody can use this same data. So you can create new verifications, almost in the way that we've got credit agencies. You can create that for news and social media like Twitter. So it's quite interesting. Other guys like Idea Market in LA are trying to do more objective ranking. So it's got me really thinking about how does that work. Idea Market is powered on Ethereum as well, but this whole idea of there's an open source view to how I collect information. It doesn't just have to be news. We could think about it insurance as oracles and where we trust those sources for. So that was a big wonder for me.
And it's an excellent one, but and I completely embraced the whole idea of decentralizing it. But then you open yourself up with regards to news, especially to state-sponsored social media departments that have hundreds of teams that are literally just there to argue one point over another. So it's there's no magical answer to it, but it's one definitely to keep watching. Rory.
Well, if you extend it then to insurance, because I think that's what, you know, I'd imagine Mark was trying to put an outside-in piece. So you could easily imagine. I mean, for me, that's one of the pieces missing from an underwriting process, which is the wisdom of the crowd being brought in. Often you create an ersatz of that by having 4-eye review, right? But there is a massive element around the wisdom of the company, which is being lost a little bit in those processes. Is that, Mark, am I right to add that dimension? Is it something you were thinking of?
Definitely within the company, but also you can look at wisdom of collective customers as well. So when you start to see that as views and sentiment and facts and behaviors, so you know, it could be, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, in supply chain, if you got more info and insight from the crowd in the same way that, you know, you see like apps like Waze, where the community is telling you what the choke points are and what the problem with traffic are, so you can navigate around it. If we could take this decentralized approach to information and validation, and back to Tony's point, how you can build that into some form of dynamic underwriting, that starts to get really interesting and powerful.
Yeah. Rory, what is it?
Sorry, before I start, Tony, as you start your new job, I really want to wish you luck, and I know that you're the right person because I've had a lot of experience with you from our Swiss Re days, and even then, you know, there was an element of aggressive listening, and I remember an event that you sponsored on a boat in the Lake of Zurich, where we really addressed the problem of, you know, a disparity between customer need and how to innovate that fit better. And so for me, that was very early and pioneering example of the new modern type of thinking that I would encourage. So I'm
took people's iPhones away at the beginning of the day and didn't give them back until the end to force them.
Nice.
Good event. So yeah, I'm confident here. My wonder this week is around the impact of the way, and it folds a little bit into Tony's concept of the importance of changing your mind and evolving, you know, and publicly admitting. My wonder is about the impact of the way people communicate innovation processes to stakeholders. And the case study from the last couple of weeks for me has been the UK government and their home-baked track and trace application for COVID-19. And this is not intended as a political piece. It's really just a sort of case study on communication. And on the one hand, I think they did the right thing, right? Or there was the right outcome, even though I know Mark and Wally don't agree, but this is my soapbox, so let me make my case. So the government at least worked out that it wasn't fit for purpose, and they ditched it and decided to join forces with Apple and Google. They broke out of sunk cost fallacy and literally said, okay, the solution is not down that rabbit hole. That's not always easy. So the outcome was, for me, in the right direction, and there's courage there. But the way they communicated it early on really didn't reflect the sort of language and positioning you should use in an innovation process, whether you're a government reporting back to the people who elected you, you know, or a startup talking to investors, or an employee or consultant trying to implement a change or a new technology in an insurance company. It's just wrong. So too much weight was put on the likelihood of success versus the value of the learning. It was too top down. It was like, we're the big guys, we have all the resources and all the tech people we need, and we'll make it happen for you. It's going to be easy for us because we're so big and macho. In most innovation parties, in most innovation processes, both parties start off with a challenge. In fact, you're trying to solve it for someone else. It's their problem, right? So it was our problem as members of the public that the government was trying to solve, and that level of empathy was sort of missing in that macho talk and positioning. So that's also, by the way, probably a good introduction for our Insureblocks business case clinics that we're going to start shortly. The first is going to be around, you know, the importance of communication in these innovation processes. So plug from our side. There's going to be more on that topic from us in Insureblocks.
Excellent. And I'm afraid we've run out of time, so we're going to have to bring this episode to a conclusion, to an end. I'm going to thank you very much, Tony, for being our guest for this week. It was a real pleasure having you on the show, and hopefully you'll join us in a future episode. Mark and Rory, always a pleasure to have you guys. And to you, the community, let's do a little bit of aggressive listening in our respective companies. I think we've got a lot to learn from our customers, from our partners, and our colleagues. And if you'd like to be part as a guest in one of our shows, please, put a comment below or send us a message. We'd love to have you on the show. But for now, I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Bye, guys.
Bye. Take care.
Cheers.